January 26, 1972. A routine flight transformed into a nightmare. 28 lives lost. An explosion shattered the sky, leaving only silence in its wake. In a moment of sheer terror, everything vanished. But the story was only the beginning. Vesna Vulović, a flight attendant, defied all odds as the sole survivor. She fell from an extraordinary height of over 33,000 feet without a parachute. Was it a miracle or a curse? Lingering questions remain. Was it a bomb or a concealed military secret? The truth buried beneath the snow alongside the wreckage and lost souls claimed by that ill-fated flight. When courage collides with conspiracy, when survival bears the weight of guilt, and when the truth is darker than one dares to uncover. January 26, 1972, Copenhagen Airport, Denmark. JAT Flight 367, operated by Yugoslavia's national airline, had just landed after departing from Stockholm Arlanda Airport in Sweden. At Copenhagen, the aircraft was scheduled to refuel before continuing to its next stopover at Zagreb Airport in the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. During the layover, passengers disembarked, and the previous crew was replaced. The new crew comprised 2 pilots and 3 flight attendants. They waited in the terminal, ready to receive their assignments from the departing team. Among them was someone whose role in the unfolding events would become extraordinary: Vesna Vulović, a 22-year-old Serbian flight attendant. According to the schedule, this was supposed to be her day off. However, by a strange twist of fate, due to a mix-up with another flight attendant of the same name, Vesna was assigned to this flight. The aircraft in service was a McDonnell Douglas DC-932, registered as Yankee Uniform Alpha Hotel Tango. This narrow-body jet, powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney JT-8D turbofan engines, had been in operation for slightly over a year and had accumulated 2,091 flight hours by the time of the flight. While waiting in the terminal, Vesna Vulović and several others observed a male passenger behaving with an unusually irritable demeanor as he disembarked. This man had checked in luggage at Stockholm Arlanda Airport, but left the flight at Copenhagen, never reboarding. Why? Because the suitcase he abandoned contained a homemade time bomb, a device so ingeniously concealed that it evaded detection by airport security. The man was later identified as a member of the Ustasha, a Croatian nationalist extremist terrorist organization. Between 1962 and 1982, this group orchestrated 128 violent attacks, targeting both civilian and military assets of Yugoslavia, spreading fear and devastation across the region. At the time, Vesna Vulović had no way of knowing that this stranger's actions would irrevocably change her life, and the lives of everyone aboard that flight, forever. At 3:14 p.m., the aircraft received clearance for takeoff. Captain Ludvik Razdri and First Officer Ratko Mihic had completed their final pre-flight checks. The 2 Pratt & Whitney JT-8D engines roared powerfully, lifting the Douglas DC-932 into the sky. By 3:15 p.m., Flight 367, carrying 23 passengers and 5 crew members, had begun its 2-hour journey southward toward Tracer, Croatia. The initial moments of the flight were smooth and uneventful. Less than 30 minutes after takeoff, the plane reached its cruising altitude of 33,000 feet, as planned. 4:01 p.m., the McDonnell Douglas DC-9 was now flying over Hermsdorf, Germany. Simultaneously, an ominous chain of events was silently unfolding on Flight 367. The time bomb, concealed within a suitcase, was ticking down its final seconds, bringing the aircraft ever closer to its inevitable fate. And then, the inevitable happened. Seconds later, a massive explosion ripped through the forward cargo hold. The intense pressure triggered the detonation of the fuel tanks, transforming the DC-9 into an enormous fireball. The sudden loss of cabin pressure rendered all control systems useless. The aircraft disintegrated mid-air, scattering debris across the village of Serbska Kamenice in Czechoslovakia, leaving behind a scene of incomprehensible devastation. The violent decompression flung most passengers from the aircraft. At an altitude of tens of thousands of feet, where temperatures plummet to minus 67 degrees Fahrenheit, survival was all but impossible. In the freezing winter weather, the peaceful village near the border was abruptly jolted by a loud explosion. Villagers rushed outside, horrified, gazing at the sky. Large and small fragments of the aircraft spiraled downward, ablaze, before crashing into the nearby forest like a fiery rain. The peaceful village was immediately replaced by shock and panic. A local resident named Bruno Honka immediately rushed to the crash site, crossing through the thick snow and dense trees in search of survivors. Upon his arrival, a grim scene unfolded. Victims were scattered across the area. The wreckage spread over a radius of 0.9 miles, including the cockpit, where the two pilots were still seated, their hands firmly gripping the controls, a testament to their desperate attempts to save the plane until the very last moment. Suddenly, a shout pierced the silence. "Someone is alive!" Bruno discovered flight attendant Vesna Vulović lying among the debris crying for help. In shock, he saw her turquoise uniform soaked in blood and her high-heeled shoes completely deformed. Fortunately, Bruno Honka had served as a military medic during World War II and quickly administered vital first aid before rescue teams arrived. All 27 passengers and Vesna's colleagues perished. The miraculous survival of the flight attendant became a sensation in Yugoslavia and around the world. The incident raised profound questions in the media, as well as in the medical and scientific communities. How could an ordinary person survive a fall from over 33,330 feet? Following the crash, Vesna Vulović sustained severe injuries and remained in a coma for 27 days. She suffered a fractured skull, 2 broken legs, 3 fractured vertebrae, a fractured pelvis, multiple broken ribs, and temporary paralysis from the waist down. Yet, miraculously, and against all odds after 10 months of determined recovery, Vesna regained the ability to walk, although her severely damaged spine left her with a lifelong limp. Her survival is considered one of the miracles in aviation history. After receiving initial treatment at a hospital in Prague, Czech Republic, she was transferred to Belgrade in March 1972. Doctors suggested hypnosis or an injection to alleviate her fear of flying, but Vesna refused, explaining that she wasn't afraid to fly and remembered nothing of the accident. In Belgrade, Vesna was placed under 24-hour police protection, as authorities feared the bombers, responsible for Flight 367, might attempt to harm her. Guards rotated shifts every 6 hours, and only family and doctors were allowed to visit. By June 1972, Vesna left Belgrade for a retreat in Montenegro. When it seemed the case had been resolved, Vesna revealed that she had no memory of the crash or the events leading up to it. She learned about the tragedy 2 weeks later when her family informed her, and she fainted upon reading a newspaper article about the accident. After the accident, Vesna recalled vague details, including the presence of a man with luggage. This observation was recorded in the initial investigations, supporting the theory of a bombing. With no other surviving witnesses and limited evidence from the crash site, investigators relied on fragments of the DC-9 and Vesna's injuries to reconstruct the events. As expected, their first conclusion was that Vesna survived because she was seated in the aircraft's tail section, the safest part of the plane. The food cart near Vesna forced her against the rear bulkhead during the explosion, preventing her from being ejected like the other passengers and crew. Additionally, the terrain at the crash site played a crucial role in her survival. The aircraft crashed into a dense forest blanketed in snow, where the tall trees and thick snow acted as natural cushions, significantly reducing the impact. Beyond environmental factors, Vesna credited her exceptional health, which she believed contributed to her survival. She maintained a nutritious diet rich in chocolate, duck meat, fish oil, and resilience, a hallmark of Serbian character. However, these explanations didn't satisfy everyone. Experts noted that from such a height, the decompression should have caused fatal blood pressure spikes, making survival nearly impossible. Vesna's case remains one of aviation's most extraordinary mysteries, defying all scientific logic. Despite the skepticism, Vesna became a symbol of hope and resilience, celebrated as a national hero in Yugoslavia. Her story gained widespread recognition across the Soviet Union and other socialist countries. Yugoslavia's President Josip Broz Tito personally awarded her a prestigious medal in recognition of her extraordinary survival. Vesna's story inspired many, including Serbian country singer Miroslav Ilić, who composed a tribute song titled "The Flight Attendant." The song not only honored Vesna, but also symbolized human resilience in the face of life's harshest challenges. The village where Vesna landed honored her as an honorary citizen in 1985. The Guinness World Records recognized Vesna for surviving the highest fall without a parachute. Her record surpassed other notable survival stories from high falls, such as Nicholas Alcamaide, a Royal Air Force serviceman who jumped from a burning Avro Lancaster at 18,000 feet, and Ivan Chisov, a Soviet Air Force lieutenant who fell from approximately 23,000 feet. After the horrific tragedy, Vesna Vulović continued to work for JAT Airlines, but no longer as a flight attendant. Instead, she was reassigned to a desk job at the office. However, this brief respite was short-lived. In the early 1990s, Vesna was dismissed from JAT after publicly opposing Slobodan Milošević, the president of Serbia from 1989 to 1997, who was later charged with genocide. To avoid provoking public outrage, Vesna was not arrested. However, pro-Milošević tabloids launched a smear campaign aimed at discrediting her. These tabloids claimed that Flight 367 had not been bombed, but rather shot down by a surface-to-air missile. They alleged that Vesna had fallen from a much lower altitude than officially stated. In 2009, this theory gained traction when journalists Peter Horn and Pavel Thiner, citing documents from the Czech Civil Aviation Authority, claimed that Flight 367 had been shot down by a Czechoslovak Air Force MiG fighter jet. They alleged that Vesna had fallen from an altitude of only about 2,600 feet, 800 meters, and accused Czechoslovak authorities of fabricating the bombing story to cover up the truth. To support their claims, the journalists cited witnesses from Srpska Kamenici, who reported seeing the plane burning but intact, flying at a low altitude below the clouds. A Serbian aviation expert who was at the crash site also noted that the wreckage was concentrated in too small area for it to be the result of an in-air explosion at high altitude. Notably, some witnesses claimed to have seen a second aircraft in the vicinity. According to theories supporting this narrative, Flight 367 may have inadvertently entered a sensitive military zone near a nuclear weapons facility, prompting it to be shot down. However, the Czech Civil Aviation Authority later dismissed the journalists' claims as a conspiracy theory. A military expert quoted in a professional journal explained that if a missile had been launched, its sound would have been heard by thousands and left a visible smoke trail. Additionally, a radar operator from Czechoslovakia's air defense stated that if any Czechoslovak aircraft had been in the area that day, German air defenses would have detected it. The American TV show Mythbusters recreated Vesna Vulović's fall and concluded that survival under such circumstances was indeed possible. Survival depended on the aircraft's position, as well as the individual's location and posture at the moment of impact. A key piece of evidence supporting this conclusion was data from the DC-9's flight data recorder, analyzed by Dutch experts. The data detailed the timing, velocity, heading, acceleration, and altitude at the time of the explosion. The analysis confirmed that the cause was terrorism, dismissing the theories of a missile strike or shoot-down. Later, a man claiming to be a Croatian nationalist phoned Sweden's Aftonbladet newspaper, taking responsibility for the bombing of Flight 367. This admission put an end to years of debate, firmly establishing the crash as a terrorist attack. The secret behind Vesna Vulović's survival. One crucial factor contributing to Vesna's miraculous survival was a congenital health condition she indirectly revealed later in life. Vesna had been born with a heart condition and abnormally low blood pressure. According to standard medical guidelines, this condition should have disqualified her from becoming a flight attendant. However, during her JAT Airlines interview, Vesna intentionally consumed a large amount of coffee to temporarily elevate her blood pressure, enabling her to pass the medical exam. Ironically, this low blood pressure became an unexpected advantage during the tragedy. When the cabin pressure plummeted following the explosion, Vesna quickly lost consciousness. This, in turn, prevented her heart from succumbing to the extreme pressure that typically causes it to rupture in similar circumstances. Doctors later confirmed that her low blood pressure was the accidental factor that saved her life, unraveling the mystery behind her extraordinary survival, a question the world had sought to answer for decades. Contrary to the fame and admiration that once surrounded her life, Vesna Vulović endured numerous personal tragedies after the accident. She married a mechanical engineer, but the marriage was short-lived, and she never had children. In her later years, Vesna lived in poverty, struggling with heart disease, a lingering consequence of the injuries sustained in the crash. She resided in a dilapidated apartment in Belgrade, relying on a modest monthly pension of approximately €300. Vesna often expressed deep regret, believing that if the accident had not occurred, her family's lives would not have been destroyed. She felt that the shock from the tragedy had caused her parents to die prematurely, leaving an irreplaceable void in her heart. In December 2016, Vesna Vulović passed away alone in her apartment. Her body was discovered days later when concerned friends came to check on her. It was a hauntingly sad end for a woman once dubbed the luckiest woman in the world. Yet for Vesna, this title was perhaps more a bitter irony than a source of comfort.